Well, here's another one of my questions for the yes or no treatment, and it's certainly an important one these days. Can countries borrow indefinitely? The fact is that even without the coronavirus, debt in all sectors of the economy, the corporate sector, personal finance, and at the national sovereign government level, has been roaring upward in recent years. And we are now at levels of debt usually measured by the ratio of total public sector debt to the size of gross domestic product, that ratio, at wartime levels. We haven't seen these levels in most countries for many years, really, since the Second World War. So, are we in big trouble here, or can we keep this going indefinitely? There are some impassioned views on both sides, so let's review them. First of all, there are those who say, yes, we can keep this going at least for the foreseeable future, if not indefinitely. Simply because interest rates are so low that the carrying cost of this debt is just simply not a burden. And I suppose if interest rates were to creep up, it might be more of a problem. But for the time being, it's not a problem. Secondly, there is a very strong macroeconomic school of thought called MMT, Modern Money Theory, that says that countries can go on borrowing indefinitely, subject to a few strictures, but relatively easy to manage. And now those principles apply principally to nations with sovereign currencies, i.e. that are managing their own currency. It gets a bit more difficult with situations where many countries have the same currency, and in particular we're thinking here of the euro, the 19 members of the Eurozone. But even they seem to have it under control. The European Central Bank, which manages this whole process, seems to have managed it without a major hiccup. So, what's the problem? And number three, the worry that, for instance, interest rates will creep up if investors in bonds get nervous does not seem to be corroborated by what's happening in the bond markets. The yields there are still at historically low levels. So what that proves is that the notions behind MMT and indefinite borrowing, as long as managed by competent professionals, seems to be vindicated. So what's not to worry? Well, as you can imagine, there are some vociferous arguments on the other side. The first one is that all of this depends upon confidence and competence in the part of senior politicians, very often a very optimistic assumption, and the financial and monetary authorities to manage this whole process properly. Because if confidence begins to wane, then those who buy the bonds, the treasuries in the case of the Americans, the gilts in the case of the UK, could well start getting nervous and shy away from buying the bonds, thus increasing the cost of that debt. Interest rates will creep up, yields will increase, and then countries who are abiding by this principle with very high levels of debt will begin to really feel the pinch. Second, the notion that this can go on indefinitely is belied by some collapses we've had recently. There was a Russian bond default some years ago that almost brought down Wall Street, certainly wrecked a very major private investment firm. Argentina defaulted. Greece, in effect, defaulted, even though the European Central Bank bailed them out. So, it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion. It can happen. Number three, when the augurs start going bad, when it starts looking like interest rates demanded by purchasers of government securities start, looking for a better deal, and there's nervousness on the part of issuing authorities. The likelihood that politicians will deal firmly with it is not confirmed by history. Politicians hate to cut spending, they hate to raise taxes, so they will delay it until, runaway inflation could be one result, makes them take tough action. So we're in nervous times, completely exacerbated by the coronavirus. And then finally, in the Eurozone, the 19 members of the Eurozone have a more immediate and probably more severe problem along these lines. The instrument through which the debts of the countries in difficulty are managed is the European Central Bank. So when Italy, which is in a state of almost economic collapse at the moment, issues more bonds to finance its deficits, the European Central Bank simply buys them. How long can that go on for? And if you took a hard look at the balance sheet of the European Central Bank and actually marked to market, as they say, in other words, valued those bonds at what they would fetch in the open market, you might come to the conclusion that the European Central Bank is technically bankrupt. So it certainly, whatever surplus it makes, it loses by virtue of the diminution in the value of its assets. So it's in a tough situation. And of course, this has all been made all the worse by the coronavirus situation and the very difficult financial circumstances that several countries, notably Spain and Italy, are in, and the increasing reluctance on the part of the more prosperous northern economies, particularly Germany, to continue to fund a bank that's bailing them out. So all of this is really quite worrying for the future. And I suppose what it means is that the economy, or that the euro is going to be abandoned probably sooner, not later, and that will cause huge dislocations, ructions within individual economies, to say nothing of a ignominious defeat for the European Union, the architect of this appallingly badly thought through economic decision. Well, what's my take? I must say I'm reasonably up to date in the arguments about MMT and those who believe that properly managed this sort of deficit process can go on indefinitely. However, what they don't mention is that the theory depends in the medium to long term on the growth rate of economies being greater than the interest cost on the debt that is being piled up in their interests. And of course, in the last few decades, that growth rate has been pretty paltry and has been kept afloat by these low interest rates, which aren't indefinitely going to last with us. So there is that problem. I suppose part of this is my my New England background, which says you just don't spend more money than you have. Mr. Micawber, of course, and Charles Dickens had the same thing to say. Well, in the case of the euro, I think it is a more immediate problem. The typical solution of the European managers is, as they say, to kick the can down the road, find a way to defer any sort of decision in difficult initiatives. But I think we're fast coming up on that time. So I think we're in for I think we're in for a real real difficulty, a spectacular series of events of some sort. And the Brexiteers would say, thank God we extracted ourselves from this business. Okay, well, gosh, that's a pretty unpleasant analysis, I suppose, but it's I think it's one that you have a hard time walking away from. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you at the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.